intros and get things running, off and running. My name is Pam Persichetti, so thank you all for joining us for our Industry Insider, part of our webinar series we try to do monthly out of the Office of Alumni Engagement. Today with us, we have Teresa Nakra and John Kaipov, both from the Arts and Communications, School of Arts and Communications. I'll do a quick intro of each of them and then kind of let them run with the program. But I did want to mention that we'll do kind of a formal, more official Q&A at the end, and I'll moderate some questions, either if you choose to ask them live or in the chat. And of course, if you have questions throughout the presentation that you want to throw in the chat or use the hand raised option, go right ahead and feel free to do that throughout the presentation as well. I think Teresa and John both would welcome the interactive nature, so go for it, feel free. We have someone in the waiting room here. All right. So Teresa is an associate professor of music and design and creative technology. She also coordinates the new interdisciplinary minor in music technology. She holds a bachelor's in music from Harvard University and went on to earn a PhD from the MIT Media Lab. She serves as the co-director of the Trenton Makes Music project and has presented her work in multiple concerts with the Boston Pops and Boston Symphony Orchestras. Her interactive conducting exhibits have been experienced in museums, concert halls around the world, and has been profiled in the New York Times, CNN Headline News, and BBC World Service, just to name a few. And alongside, we have John Kaipov, who teaches digital fabrication, product design, creative coding, and physical computing in the Department of Design and Creative Technology. I definitely needed my cheat sheet for all of that. To quote John, he makes things with computers and glue, but to give him the credit he deserves, I'll also mention that he owns a small design workshop equipped with 3D printers, laser cutters, CNC machines, woodworking tools, and a full YouTube studio. He does freelance work for large and small brands alike, and he earned his bachelor's degree in graphic design from TCNJ and went on to then earn an MPS from the Interactive Telecommunications Program at New York University. So we are thrilled to have both of you with us today. Thank you for taking time out of your busy teaching and gig economy schedules to be with us and kind of share some insights on what that gig economy might look like and really what the whole creative technology and art space looks like today. Post-COVID is always a factor now in everything we talk about. So I'm going to turn it over to Teresa to begin. But yeah, thank you both for being with us. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Pam. We're so happy to be here, and any opportunity to co-present with John is always a delight. So thank you so much, and welcome everyone to this conversation. We're excited to talk to you about some of the things that bring us a lot of joy. John is one of the most innovative people I know as the founder of the Makerspace at TCNJ. And, it's an honor to be able to talk to alumni from all decades of TCNJ and Trenton State College. So thank you all for making time today. I think today's presentation should be about connecting with each other. John and I have a lot of things that we want to talk about. We want to have a productive conversation, not only with each other, but with all of you. And we want to generate lots of ideas and pathways forward. We recognize that the past year and a half may have been difficult for you and for all of us. And so our goal is to present some ways of thinking that are both hopeful, but also practical and realistic about, charting a kind of a personal agenda for each one of us, and a way of kind of moving through some of the challenges of life with positivity and innovation. So I think before we jump in, I'll just invite those of you who might like to let us know what you hope to gain from this webinar by typing in the chat. So if there's something that you're looking forward to hearing from us today, we'd love to know what that is. And also, if you wish, you can let us know what your major was at TCNJ and what year you graduated if you wish to. And so whether you're an alum from one of our departments or if you were just intrigued by the topic, we welcome the opportunity to talk with you and share some of our ideas and experiences. So John, maybe we should start. What is our overall message here today? I mean, we know that COVID will gradually subside, but maybe we should start out by talking about what the pandemic has taught us in terms of the creative economy and what things have changed, and what are you focused on in the years ahead?
Well, that's a question for me. I think the biggest change coming back to TCNJ, especially as I'm teaching senior thesis, I realized like the workforce, in quotes, is going to be a lot different than it was 2 years ago, right? And even I had two conversations with CEOs who are looking for students for internships and things, and both CEOs who have large buildings are actually, they're going to like mostly remote and virtual. And so instead of taking on full-time employees, they're looking more for gig workers. And that has positive and negative implications for, well, for both. And so I think as, a college, we should start talking about that. I can say that I've had a business since I was in middle school, and I got my first detention in sixth grade because I was selling cassette tapes that I would record on the radio, and I was selling things by the song. I had this idea where you could sell, instead of entire albums, you could sell just by the song, which later became iTunes, like way later. And I got in a lot of trouble for doing this at lunchtime, and it was. But I've always had a business, but I never actually registered a business until I was on my mid 30s, because in K to 12, you're taught how to get into college, and in college, you're taught how to be an employee oftentimes. The default is not owning a business, and there's reasons for that, obviously. But I think as we go forward, I think those trends are going to change. They are changing. And so I think it's important as a college that we address some of that.
Yeah, that's great. And we're getting some interesting stuff in the chat. There's somebody who named Michael who's looking for workforce development opportunities.
Awesome.
And also Kara is looking for stories for the magazine. So that's cool. And ways to interface with the working world. So this is great. This is really interesting to see what people are thinking about. Along the same lines, I often tell the story, John, that when I was a kid, I don't know, I guess I never realized that most people don't do this, but I spent a lot of my time, instead of babysitting like my peers, I would go out and give violin lessons to all the neighbors' kids. So, and we often don't think about teaching as a gig, but it really is. And certainly teaching music has been a day job for me for many years, but also, during times of earlier times in my career, it has been a really important regular income that has sustained some of the more creative things that I've also done. So, we can talk also about balancing, the different kinds of gigs that help pull things together so that you can kind of sustain yourself.
It's funny. I didn't actually know that. When I was in high school, I was giving guitar lessons, driving to people's homes, and I would do this all night and all weekend. And there was a point, most of the time, I was making more than my mom and dad combined for a short time. Like, I had a lot of gigs, and it was all just so I didn't have to work at McDonald's. You know what I mean? I just wanted my own thing. That was the only motivation. Plus, I loved guitar, and I think that was the seed for me to later become a professor. I found a lot of value in teaching. So. Here we are.
So for both of us, we do also have to admit that teaching is a gig, right?
It is.
And that's something to think about. So as the arts sector, and the entire economy, finds ways to rebuild over the coming phase, recovery is going to really depend on adaptability to adjusted situations, right? And the challenges ahead are going to require that we really emphasize creativity, innovation, interdisciplinarity, and entrepreneurship. And I wonder, John, what your thoughts are on that, on being nimble in the delicate times ahead.
Yeah, it's funny. I don't know if anybody here, and you feel free to join the conversation. Anybody here like an Uber driver or an Amazon fulfillment center associate? You can't call them warehouse workers. Anybody have a gig like economy like that? I'm not sure. Some of our students do, and
they do.
Yeah, and so and thinking, going to this conversation, I'm realizing there's steps, and I know we have two Jessicas here. One, we'll speak to them shortly. Just started to open up a brand new store in Yardley, which we should all go to, and the other one draws amazing portraits of pets. And I think starting early, maybe would it help? Can I give like a 2-minute story, just kind of like where I've come from and where I'm going? And I think that might illustrate I'm realizing there are steps to things. So just give me like 2 minutes, and then
Yeah.
I get this out of my system. So I'm in my garage right now. I'm going to show you a little video of my garage. And so it's just a 1-car garage, and inside this is what it looks like when it's all clean. And it's got a whole bunch of different digital fabrication tools and woodworking tools and things like that. And so when I wanted this shop, this had like busted out windows and everything else. When I wanted to make this shop, I had to do a lot of freelance work in order to get that shop. And so I started doing everything from like restroom signs, like pretty much anything anybody wanted. If I drive through my town, I did almost all the signs that you see in all the restaurants. I was selling things on Etsy. I was going to craft fairs. I started making videos, and that was a really good way to pay for everything in the shop. Now, once I had all the tools, then you need to figure out what you're doing with those tools. So I started making videos, and one of the first videos I made was teaching people how to use like the laser cutter. And I created a very short video. Actually, it was like 10 minutes, wasn't that short, on everything you can do with laser engraving. And I got very, very lucky with this video because a lot of people saw value in that versus my other videos where I was doing things for fun and like creative projects. But by giving value to the community and publishing it, all of a sudden, better opportunities started coming in. And so one example of that, I'll show you this one. So after I released that video, oh, by the way, that video made $45,000 on YouTube, which paid for more tools and things in the shop. But more importantly, just by publishing the work that you're doing in a platform where people are looking for it, all of a sudden the better opportunities come by. So I got an email shortly after that video from this guy, Mike Ciparelli. I don't know if you can see this. So he wrote and he says, hey, can you do anything for us? So I started sending him all kinds of samples. And before you knew it, I was making custom drum parts for his company. So here I'm making a laser engraved skull thing that goes on a drum shell. And what I loved about it is like you could actually see the people buying it. And then we just kept going from one project to the other. So this one's like Slipknot's new line. It's a snare drum. And so we started doing more than the badges, but also like working on all the like the lugs and all that other kind of stuff. And it was just one project after another after another. And every time you do a project, you actually invite more and more freelance opportunities. I think the last one I'll show here is this is Mike.
We love turning dreams into drums. Look at this thing. This is a custom, call it a trippy psychedelic acid wash over age white pearl for Mr. Dan Flatsman of Imagine Dragons.
So that was like, we did everything from Imagine Dragons, 21 Pilots. We did like a whole bunch of different bands. And then even better freelance projects came along. We had Google, and we started doing stuff with SpaceX and like all the big companies all of a sudden working with the laser company like crazy. And so that was good, except I didn't need any more stuff. Like, and so if you think about like the gig economy, like doing freelance projects, it's good, but it's not scalable. You can only do so much. So if I think about like this particular week, before I go into one other thing, this particular week, what did I do? This morning I dropped off some ice cream signs that are half cut that someone else finishes. Then I picked up these wooden knives that I have to engrave. Then after tonight I got to go pick up something to do a 6-foot thing for some Italian restaurant. But the big one I'm doing, check this out. I'm making.
When he says big, he means it.
Yeah, this is one of 74 bones. We're making a 21-foot dinosaur that's going to a commercial in LA. So like, and there's all other kinds of stuff happening just this week. So like my late nights are crazy, but you're still only going to make so much. Like I got all these great clients, but I'm never going to be able to move out of the garage. And so the last step that I realized, like everything that I'm doing, I'm making products for other people. If you actually want to make something that's scalable, you have to create your own product. And so I've been doing pretty well on YouTube and things like that, and I've learned all these things. And so one of the things I started doing is this, and I might want to talk about this more a little bit later, but started building this course. I don't know if you can see this.
Again, teaching, right, as a gig.
Yes. Yeah. So I started building this course. I'm making 50 videos by February. I'm experimenting with like small group live sessions, one-on-one tutoring, and things like that. And And what that allows me to do, let me stop playing this real quick. What that allows me to do, and this is important, you start to build an ecosystem where things start feeding into other things. So if I think about this course, for every 1,000 students I get, I make about $150,000. And so I couldn't do that many signs. Like the signs and all the other stuff got me here, but basically I used a YouTube channel to get people excited about the course. Like that's my advertising, the way I establish trust. I use like social media ads. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to go down that road a little bit. I'm very active in the Facebook forums. I'm doing lots of workshops for Make Magazine, but all of those things feed the course. And once the course starts, I make money on tuition. I make a lot of money on affiliates. I make money on one-on-one tutoring. I'm going to start selling materials because, getting new clients or new customers is harder than, just like selling more to existing ones. And so before you know it, like the YouTube feeds, like the physical material stuff, that everything feeds every other thing. And so like almost everything that I have to do going forward has to somehow feed the course if you actually want this thing to scale. And so I'm at the point finally, after years and years and years and years of work in this direction, knowing where the niches are and all the research, doing the gig stuff. And now it's like I actually I found a need and I know how to feed it and actually how to leverage some of that. So
yeah, that's
anyways,
fantastic, John.
That's kind of like a little bit what we're thinking. I just stopped there, but like I realize this thing comes in steps. A lot of people will start businesses on Etsy, and if it doesn't like scale well immediately, they drop off. But they don't realize oftentimes that it just takes a few years to build that network out.
And John, I think also one of the things that you're demonstrating with this by telling the story about your own projects here is also very clearly you're showing that you have to combine multiple aspects, not just disciplines, but the traditional skill of woodworking and the kind of the skills of using these modern tools, but also social media and video production and teaching and content, right? That you're writing scripts for all of these things. So you have kind of a whole ecosystem of skills and techniques that you're using to build your own brand here.
Sort of, but here's the other thing too. You have to work to your highest value. So right now I'm doing a lot of things that I should probably hire other people to do so I can work on the thing that I'm best at. And I'm just learning that now. So I started hiring people to do things that I love to do, but I don't need to do. And so like that all helps. So you have to make some real trade-offs and sacrifices. And so there's always this constant pull, and and I'm always thinking about like the plus and cons of different things, like the gig economy versus a full-time job versus a part-time job and they all have like their pros and cons. So you basically have to pick your poison. And this is like not based on any science. This is just based on my thoughts this morning. Like really trying to navigate this. Like, is there a choice? Can you combine these things? And I think the answer is yes. Like you can have a full-time job and have like and partake in the gig. There's multiple combinations. So
Jessica Bauer predicted what you were going to say about hiring people. So maybe that means that it's a good time to bring Jess into this conversation. Yeah. John, can you introduce Jess for everybody here who doesn't know her?
Sure. And honestly, I only learned, I met Jess the last one of these sessions, and she opened up a store. So it was all kind of insightful conversation last time. And you just opened up a store, and I came to your opening, and I was like, that is the dream. Like eventually I'm going to move out of the garage and have my own store. Yeah. So that's about what I know. So how's the opening going? Are there any, I'm sure
it's been great. I mean, it's, when I built the business, I'm in a position financially where I have the time to build it the way that I want to. And that doesn't mean that I can't not have customers. I absolutely have to have customers, but I'm not gonna drown if I don't get customers like today. So it's a luxury for me to be in the position I am at the moment, and I do realize it. That said, it's been a little slow. Yardley it's not far from TCNJ. It's only 15 minutes right on the Delaware River. It's the first exit over in PA off of 295. Small town, it has not had retail for a really long time, and it has not had any good retail for a really long time. So they're still figuring it out. But the fantastic thing is that since I've opened the store, I've only had somebody else working for me just like a little bit here and there. So I physically have been in the store, every day that I've been open since September 14th. So the conversations have been fantastic. People are really looking forward to having something like my store in Yardley, and my online business is currently being built out. And speaking of hiring things for people that do it better than you, I have hired someone to do my entire website. So I could build it. I have done websites in the past, and I know what needs to be done. I do not have the bandwidth to do it. So
That was literally your major.
yeah, I mean, I was a fine arts major, but I've done a ton of graphics and things over the years, just here and there. And then I coached independent creatives on how to do those things too. But I can't, like, that's the thing when you own your own business, or you're working more of a gig economy type thing, like you guys are talking about, you physically cannot do everything. And if you decide that that's how you're going to approach it, good luck. So as soon as John mentioned that he couldn't scale his business, I was like, well, clearly you need to figure out how you can hire somebody to be in your workshop executing all of the things that you would be sitting there fiddling with the machines to do. And then you should be off doing something else that's more substantial, bringing in new clients, working on like more exclusive projects, things like that. So that would be the first step I would have told you when you reach that breaking point. But you have another skill set, which is the teaching and the YouTube. Not everybody has that breadth of, ability. So that might not be an option. So you really do have to look at, how can I hire somebody to actually get the, get to the next step, which I am already planning in my shop. I have an assistant who's just a junior in high school who comes in, but she's putting price stickers on things for me. I don't need to do that. I really, really do not. I mean, sometimes I have to, because you have to wear a lot of hats when you own a business. But, I have her coming in about 8 hours, 9 hours a week, which is just enough for me to have her do those kind of small things and frees me up to be doing some other stuff. And then, for example, with the website, that was it just had to go to somebody else who does it faster and better than I could have done in less time. So the woman that I'm working with, the only thing she does is Shopify stores for product-based businesses. That's it. She does not do anything else. So she knows exactly what she's doing for my particular type of business. So I offloaded that as soon as I realized that I was never going to have the, bandwidth to do it. So right now, I mean, in terms of trying to scale, John hit on a lot of things that are really important and in multiple different ways. But looking at what you really should be focusing on, like I saw somebody come in that just commented in the chat about something about how do you balance like doing work and social media, and how much time do you spend selling
marketing and social
something
media.
Was it? Yeah. So
that was me.
Yeah. There's a basic rule that for that kind of work, you as the business owner should be spending about 65 to 75% of your time really on sales and marketing, on things that directly bring income into your individual business, whether that's a gig economy version of what, or more traditional like I have. And a lot of people, when you say those things, they look at you like, what the heck are you talking about? How could you possibly spend 75% of your time on revenue generating activities and marketing, which, those things are going hand in hand. But if you don't, the alternative is that you're just going to be doing busy work most of the time and not making income. So, and I know a lot of people, not everybody here is a creative. I notice there's some people who are in multiple different disciplines, but, a lot of people have a concept that is, it's not overblown. It's like your physical touch and your influence on the things that you're producing is really important. That said, one of the best abilities you can have as a business owner is to understand when you actually don't need to be the one physically doing the work. Because I've worked with people that have sworn until they were blue in the face, saying, no, I have to be the one that physically makes this product. And you say, okay, great. You can continue to make a total of $60,000 a year with, and making a physical product means that a solid 50% of that is your materials out the door. So if you want to work yourself until you're blue in the face, making essentially 30 grand a year and barely supporting your family and whatever it is, then fine, that's your choice. But at the end of the day, if you really look at those key things that absolutely have to have your influence and your touch, and remove the rest and find somebody else to outsource it, it doesn't mean you have to suffer quality, all that kind of stuff. But you just have to admit to yourself that you are physically one person. You cannot do everything. You just can't.
Mhm.
So the people who are going to be successful and be able to balance multiple different careers, or doing what John's doing, where he's got a bunch of different things going on, is he's figuring out, what are these parts that I can just give to somebody else, that I don't have to sit here and work with a laser cutter while it's doing 700 tiny little parts. I can find somebody else to do those things. That's a huge strength.
You brought up a good point. Like, one of the things that I struggle with is essentialists versus non-essentialist tasks. So like a non-essentialist weights every task as equal, right? And so you pour a lot of energy into a lot of areas, but you don't move very far. Now, if you're an essentialist, you deem most activities as non-essential, so you're able to focus on the things that matter most. And that's a really tough lesson to learn, because most of our lives, that's not how we're taught. Like, if there's a college class, or you're going to college and you have 4 classes, each of those 4 classes generally holds the same weight and the same value. You know what I'm saying? So like, thinking differently is hard when you're out.
But critical, right? To prioritize what are the most important things for you to do as the business owner. And there's some great questions for Jess about payroll. So I don't know if Jess is willing to answer those in the chat, but thank you, Jess. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, all that kind of stuff, like, and not to sound slightly snarky, just Google it. The Google is your friend. YouTube is your friend. If you don't know how to do it, or don't know what a thing is to look at, like that kind of stuff, like, those are not things to suffer over. And I'm just using QuickBooks for all that kind of stuff. Like, it's an all-encompassing one kind of platform. But those technological hurdles, or things that you don't really know how to do, there is a jillion resources out there. My former career, when I was doing coaching for the independent jewelry designers, I had a woman I was her manager. And when she first came on, she would come and ask me all these different things. Like, if I was like, Google is your friend. Like, if you don't know, just look it up. Because those are things that it shouldn't be a hindrance to you. And those tools are available to you, to be able to move forward a little bit quicker, so that you don't have to worry about it, because there's always things available. So whether it's you don't know how to connect to a Zoom meeting because it's your first one, you can Google that, or things that can help you. It's a very, very powerful tool, and you don't have to be in the dark very long.
That's one of the first rules of entrepreneurship, is giving yourself permission to learn, right? That you actually aren't limited by what you already know. And that's, actually I should pivot there, because that's a point that John and I were going to talk about, is the role of innovation and invention. And John, talks about giving oneself the permission to be a lifelong learner. We talk about that sometimes in our classes as kind of a critical 21st century skill. But John, what do you think about when you think about like being innovative in this gig economy?
I mean, it's a loaded term. So essentially, innovation happens sometimes when you have a goal, and you try to reach that goal somehow, and that's often where the innovation happens. Like, usually you don't do something hard and uncomfortable for no reason. It's usually because you want something, and that something isn't easy, so you have to be innovative in order to make it work. I'm wondering if I can ask that question of Jessica Cavanaugh, because she's also on the call, and I'm only because, Jessica, we've been rooting for you since the beginning, and I know your story. You started in retail. I think you're still on the call. Yep. And now you have a business, right? And I'm wondering, just like, what made you switch? I'm going to put her Instagram of her work in there, and if you haven't, like, you're literally probably the best artist I've ever known in person. So
thank you.
yeah, and so we want you to succeed. So I put your link in Instagram. So how did that happen? How did you, like, was there any kind of innovative processes that you had to do to make this happen?
I
And
feel
how's
like
it going?
a lot of things happened at once, but I worked in retail right after college because the business I was working in, like, I had opportunities for me. So I just kind of kept going with those opportunities, as kind of, I feel like a lot of people do when they just get out of college. It's just like, okay, I'm going to go somewhere that I know is going to give me opportunities, I feel like I don't know where to take my art yet or whatever. So I was a fine arts major, but yeah, I then became like assistant manager of a store and then a manager of a shoe store. But then COVID happened and my store was permanently closed, which happened to a lot of businesses. And then I had to basically just focus on my family for all of 2020 because I had baby niece and nephew that like needed family members to watch them. And so all of my energy was family 2020. But then 2021 started. I have a wonderful sister who always like believed in my work. And she said, hey, like, I know you always want to do a portrait business. Can I help you just like figure out a Facebook page for it? And I said, okay, whatever. But then suddenly I kind of just like kept getting all of the ideas. Like she just kind of helped push me forward and helped me understand that, hey, wait a minute, I feel like I do know how to do this. So I just went straight into research. And just like other Jess said, there are a lot of things that you can learn by Googling and stuff. And I literally just kept researching like, fine art, small businesses or portrait businesses, because I do hyper realistic artwork. And then I actually found this book. It's called Art is My Career by Sema Martin. And it actually helped me a lot because it literally gives you like an action plan of how to like start an art business, whether or not you're starting from scratch. And it helped me like actually, okay, well, what do I have to do? What are my short-term goals? What are my long-term goals? And like, I made like mission statements for myself, a vision statement for myself, and I hung them up in my area that I'm working in. I used my unemployment money to buy materials, like new materials. And so another big thing I think with me was that I used my connections to my advantage. So I have a friend that went to college for entrepreneurship and web design. And I came to her to help me help with marketing and web design. And actually, she was just great. She just wanted to help me in every area because she's a friend of mine. But I also have another friend that went to school for graphic design, and she was more than happy to help me design my logo and like my icons on social media. And then also I had meetings with my graphic design friend and my web design friend about designing my website. Like we literally had like business meetings together. And I had my sister's fiance does taxes. He's an accountant. And so I went to him to understand how to organize my finances. And, I use ZipBooks to organize like my finances and stuff. So I feel like a big thing for me was timing, but also like utilizing the fact that I had unemployment coming in from a job that I made like a good amount with. And I utilized my connections for the timing that I had that money coming in to like actually like buy a new laptop, buy new materials, pay for starting a new website and all that stuff. So I started really like going into it in like February, March, and like making pet portraits and finally like starting my social media page. And and it kind of just went on from there. Like friends and family would come to me, friends of friends now that I don't really know that well, friends of family members that know me through someone else. Like it starts to like branch out. So I'm kind of like in that phase right now where I have commissions lined up for the next like couple months. And it tends to just slowly branch out to like other people that don't know me, but know me through someone else. My website is fully up and running. So now people can order commissions without having to directly message me through social media, which I really love because I think a lot of us who work in the creative field know that sometimes that can be a frustrating experience, taking orders through direct messaging. So I feel like it's still a slow process and I'm still in that like first year of starting a business. So like John said earlier, it could take a couple of years for really things to really start like booming and stuff, but I see the progress. It's a slow progress, but I see the progress. So I'm going to keep working. Like, I might take a part-time job here or there, but I'm still keeping like this business as my top priority and utilizing my connections and things like that. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you for all that. It's really exciting to see what our alumni are doing. It's truly remarkable. John, we said that we were gonna at some point open up the floor to general conversation. Does it make sense to do that now? I see
I
there's
think
some
so,
wonderful
because otherwise we'll be
questions.
here all day. Yeah, my head is like, yeah.
I see that
Although we
Derek
didn't really
won.
get to you, Teresa. Teresa, I mean, you're the only person I know that has like patents, and it's like you're super humble, and you've had nonprofits. Like you've gone, like I'm making stuff out of my garage, but you've actually done like real things with your businesses. Yeah. It's yeah. Like, how does that like patent IP? Like about a whole different level of stuff. I'm just I'm experimenting. I'm like, oh, that works. I'll do more of that. But you actually are more methodical about your approach.
I was very lucky early on to meet an IP lawyer who carefully explained to me the benefits of having patents and copyrights on your work. So I highly recommend it. If you, one of the great things about being in the arts is that there are attorneys who are happy to do pro bono work for the arts. There's an organization called Volunteer Lawyers for the Arts, among others. And those are attorneys who are encouraged as part of their practice to donate some of their time. So those of you who are considering this should take a look at some of those kinds of services. But yeah, definitely having copyright and patents will help you. Also having someone take a look at your contracts, I think, is critical. And I learned that, I guess, the hard way in some ways, working for museums where the budgets were big, but also there were some risks involved in developing exhibits for museums. So, because you spend half a year or a year working on a project, you don't want to not get paid at the end of it. So the bigger the project, the more you want to be careful. But I think for me as a music person, I think I'll just share my screen for a second. One of the things that I think took me down this line of work was one of my gigs in college was I was an usher at the Boston Symphony Orchestra. I was a classical music nerd. And I used to take a look up at the top of the proscenium the stage, and there was a big cartouche up in the top, big gold laminated thing with the name Beethoven etched in it. And I used to wonder about it, like, why is Beethoven such a thing, in classical music? But I think sometimes we venerate the past so much that we get stuck to it. And I think part of what has been very engaging for me is to not let those prior models and kind of find ways of both respecting the past, but also moving through it to the future with respect. So for me, the kinds of stuff that I like to do are kind of using things like VR and video games to promote classical music understanding, or music in general. And so one of the kinds of projects I got to do recently was to work with a guy named Thomas Dolby, who some of you may recognize. He was a kind of a one-hit wonder on MTV back in the late 80s. But Thomas now teaches at the Johns Hopkins Institute in one of their music programs, and he's been working on a VR system to help teach conducting students there at their conservatory. So for me, entrepreneurialism can take a lot of different forms. But let me just quickly play. Here's just a little clip of the project we put together. It's a VR experience for musicians who want to know what it's like to conduct an orchestra. So here, I'll just like 1 minute of it here. Here we go. Did I remember to share sound? Okay. So this was a collaboration with Marin Alsop.
I'm not getting the sound. I'm not sure if
sorry. Let me reshare that there. That's better. I'm a little out of touch with Zoom because we've been teaching in person lately. Here we go.
And the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra. But tonight, you're going to be our guest conductor. But before you step on the podium, I wanted to give you a little taste of what you'll be conducting. The first movement of Mahler's Sixth Symphony.
So I'll stop it there. I won't take up any more time. But for me, being entrepreneurial is about taking some of the ways of thinking that we used to employ that sometimes in some ways held us back and kind of inverting them. So in my case, it's about making museum exhibits that teach kids and the public about classical music or, some interesting aspect of music that pushes it forward into the digital future. So that's a little bit about me. But I'd love to know, especially, I think Derek Wan may still be on this call. I know Derek's been working in television for decades. I'm curious, I don't know if Derek would be willing to unmute and talk with us a little bit about what the gig economy means to you. Are you there?
He may have dropped off unless he's the phone number, but
No, then Derek, okay. So, well, maybe we can put it to, John, shall we put it to everybody else to let us know what's.
Can I mention one more thing? Only because we had a very funny moment. So, and Jessica, number 2, touched on this, where you put your mission statement somewhere where you would see it every single day, right? And I think it's important if you want to start a business and you want it to be successful, and that there are so many people, everyone around you, your family, your friends, society in general, that everyone's going to tell you not to do it. They're all going to tell you reasons not to do it. And so to push through that noise is really hard. So it's just the other night, I'm hoping to move out of the garage, and I have a spot in mind. And every time, so at night, I walk my dog. It's totally dark out. I go through the streets of Lambertville. I find the building. It's in the dark. And I go in the back of the parking lot like a weirdo. And I look through the windows because like I can see like what it looks like that to have the machine set up in the film studio and this and that. Like every single minute of the day, it pops in my mind to like, okay, no, keep working. You're going to get this. You're going to get this. You're going to get this. And then just the other night, I'm looking into the windows like a weirdo, and then Teresa's in one of the rooms. And I was like, with the mask, I'm like, oh, is that Teresa? And I had to run away. But it's important. I guess my thing is like everyone's going to tell you like you shouldn't do this. Like it's not smart to do it. It's not stable. It's all the reasons, right? Why you shouldn't do it. But it's important to like stay focused and know you're in it for the long haul, right? And I think that's really hard. So I listen to podcasts, I watch YouTube videos, anything to brainwash myself into like not giving up, because there are a lot of times in the business where you're like one thing goes wrong. I'm not even mentioning the cloud project, where you're like, I shouldn't have never started. But you need a lot of support, internal support and external support from other people that are supportive to keep you moving forward. Otherwise, you're just going to fall back to what's safe and comfortable.
It's also important to prove those people wrong, in my opinion.
Yes.
Prove them wrong. And then you'll show other people who aren't sure that it's possible,
That
John,
story
can I
also.
propose a-
Sorry,
Teresa, go ahead.
I'll just say that story also illustrates that John and I are both obsessed with Lambertville, New Jersey. For those of you who may not know about it, it's an incredible example of the gig economy and the creative economy at work and at play. And it's a community that I think suffered a lot recently with flooding situation, but they've also been incredibly good at leveraging social media. And someone mentioned earlier, like GoFundMe type crowdsourcing to help help them get back on their feet after the devastation of the floods. So I'm always impressed by that community. So I'm often there, as John knows. Anyway, Jess, you were about to jump in there. Please go back.
I was just curious, like there's quite a few people on here. One of the things I used to do when I was doing a lot of the coaching for independents and creatives was just ask like what, especially for those of you who are here, like what is your number one struggle? Like, why are you here? Like chatting with us. It could just be that you're, looking for just a good conversation and some community building and all that kind of stuff, which is totally cool. But if there's like a real reason, like that you're struggling with like something, I'd probably like to know about it. So, and back to John's point about people telling you not to do things, the beginning of opening my store, which I had left my career for previously, a stable career, previously about a year ahead of this particular conversation, had already signed a lease, had already bought thousands of dollars worth of stock, had a conversation with my financial advisor that literally had me crying on the floor for 2 hours afterwards. And then I took like, I don't know, it probably took me a week and a half to get over it. And then had to realize that he was coming from a place that had a ton of baggage, and that you know, some of the things that he really wanted to put on me were just not gonna apply because,
Mhm.
you know, I get to do it my own way. And, you know, that's one of the nice things about when you're working more of a gig related business or, you know, self-employed type thing. But
I just had, Jessica, you're reminding me that just last week I had a student in my office and I was in the position, he was asking me whether I should, whether he should go to LA and try to make it selling beats to, his friends who are working with Justin Bieber. And I said, well, I could be in the position of discouraging him, right? You know, and I'm having this dialogue in my head as I'm listening to him talk to me, and I'm thinking, should I discourage this kid and tell him that no, you must stay at TCNJ and finish your studies. You cannot go to LA and work with Justin Bieber. And at some point I said, you know what, I can't be in this kid's way. And I said, you know what, why don't you take a leave of absence for the spring semester? Go see if Justin Bieber will pay you. And, you know, by August, you should know whether or not you're making it. And if not, come back to TCNJ and re-enroll.
Teresa, that's where I'll add, only because you called on me.
Oh,
That's
good,
all
good.
like, I think that the gig economy, it's like, I will say that it helped me in my first 15 years of my career when I ended up in LA, surprise, surprise, to kind of figure out like, what was I really good at, right?
Mhm.
I think I went into a career where I had no experience really, didn't study it in college really, took a few TV radio courses, but didn't know what that was, but was able to kind of figure out what my specialty was and what people relied on me on and just like kept leaning into it. And for some reason, and I know it's different for every industry, but I realized I made more as a freelancer. I could negotiate how much was my supply and demand and all of that versus relying on like that person I work for. But right now I'm very happy where I am, and grateful that I also have 2 kids. So the world is different, right? So, but I would say like good advice to ask someone to come out and see if it works, but always come back if it doesn't. But I always say the best part about trying it is you'll discover where you need to improve, right? I think of folks who would want to be in scripted or want to write scripts, and I'm like, or if you keep just sharing it within the TCNJ community, I've talked to students, it's not enough. It doesn't matter how many awards you win in New Jersey. If you can't get out there and get into these other fellowships and internships and the world isn't grabbing your script right away, then maybe we have to like figure out what it is you should lean into. Because I was always told that I'm not creative. My creative writing teacher, my my editors for newspapers always like, just stick to the news, just stick to the news. And I was like, okay, maybe I can't write that way, but I can walk into a room and like go crazy and be creative with my voice and with like what I see, and I close my eyes and I dream about things, but I can probably not write it or present it to you in a pretty way. It'll be probably really newsy, really nerdy. But I always also, just talking to Paul's comment, is you got to go where you think the career is. So, you know, I was a 9/11 graduate kind of like during that time. So there was no jobs in New York or New Jersey. So it was about like, there were just more jobs in California, and I was just going to figure it out. And well, I've been here for almost 20 years. So
Derek, I'm so glad you jumped in because, you know, you and I have chatted in the past, and I'm aware of some of the television work that you've done, which is just spectacular. So, I mean, here I am asking you whether I should have advised that student. I mean, do you think also that it's important to finish a degree? This was the challenge I had in my mind as I'm trying to advise this student. I mean, you know, do you also think that it's important to complete a liberal arts education before taking that risk, perhaps?
I'm interested in what other folks are saying, but I mean, traditionally, I think the world here would say you don't, but I think the big question is to providing the space that if it doesn't work out, that school is awesome. What I love about school and the institution, so saying it that way, is the discipline, right? To really take in as much as you can. So if that student is curious, he, she, they will always come back, right? And I think that's the big thing. As long as you're curious, and it's not like, well, I'm a good beatbox person. I know I am. It's like, well, you can tell yourself that 1,000 times, but like, are you curious about other things that you can transfer or translate that into something, your talents into something else? Because I never thought I would be in nonfiction series on some streaming platform. I thought I was going to write for a newspaper or like hopefully a magazine, but once again, wasn't creative enough. But that was like my trajectory, right? And I was like, I'm just going to sit in the behind police cars and do police beats. And it's fine. I'll just be happy doing that. So to think that like a streaming platform is a career, like, thought about it.
It wasn't on anyone's mind back when it wasn't a possibility, right? You grew with it. Yeah. Yeah.
I also, I feel like it's important too that you gave that student an action plan too. So he wasn't sure if he should go, and you also felt like education was important. So you said you believed in him. You said, okay, like take off just this semester and see how it goes. Like, but you always gave the opportunity and the option for him to like come back. So I feel like it's important that you gave him an action plan that like gave like a good view in, for the future. And I think that's what some of us need. Like when we're not sure if we should take the leap or whatever, it's like, okay, well then what does it mean if I go in this direction? What does it mean if I can come back? And, and I just feel like it's important to kind of like give yourself like that plan to lead to success, and the opportunity to come back if it doesn't work out or something. So I feel like that was like a good thing to tell the student.
Hopefully not too irresponsible. And it's funny though, the value of a backup plan. I'm curious what John feels about this also. I mean, it's important to know that you do have something you can fall back on, but if you're too aware of that, you might not take that leap completely. Right, John? Do you agree with that too? It's a funny balance, isn't it?
It is. One of the things I tell students too that about freelance, if you do as much freelance as you can starting in college, it's kind of like speed dating, but with industries. You'll start to realize what industries you like working with and which ones you don't. So that will gain you'll gain confidence in that way. But I mean, what's the alternative if you don't try? You're just going to regret like not knowing. Like, oh well, sometime is better than like what if? You know what I mean? So like. But not for everybody. You have to like really dig deep inside and be like, what's important? What are my values? Well, I regret this. Like, is it? And if you're hungry for it, maybe you should listen to the intuition and then start to make plans to set up your life, like pay down your debts. Like that's one of my biggest goals now. Going to grad school, racking up $200,000 worth of debt. That was a terrible idea. Still paying that off a lot. But the minute that debt is, I'm free. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, you have to like minimize. You have to set yourself up for success, I think. And until you're probably like, yeah, I can do this. I know I can do it. I can't fail at this point. Like there's no alternative to fail. Like I must make this work.
Right.
So yeah, like if you need to do it, you need to do it. And some people aren't made for it, and that's fine. But if you're like hungry for it, if you're on this call because there's a little voice in your head saying, man, I wish I did it. Why not try? It might take 3 years, but like every single day, one step forward. Every single day, one step forward and at some point you'll be living that dream. As I used to tell Maurice, I could smell the upholstery like in a new space. Like I would envision it fully. I would know how it smells and like how I would park and like where I'd get the coffee on my way in. And then when that day finally comes and you're exhausted and your eyes are bloodshot and everything's like a mess, but like you have that moment, like you can savor that. Like it's something you've been working for so long. And kind of live it. Like, and it's like, boom. Like, and I would often tell the students too, like there's two kinds of people or two kinds of things. Like a lot of people, there's micro and macro fulfillment or happiness. When you're owning a business, a lot of the micro stuff is pretty horrible. Like the day to day, like this didn't work. Why? This is late. How come there's a chip? That's not the color I chose. Yes, it is, by the way. But the macro is like, damn, I did this. I got the shop. I'm working with these people. But on the other hand, if you're working a job, a lot of the micro might be fun. Like, oh, I went out to, I went to a fun meeting, but the macro is like, I'm not doing anything with my life. Like it wasn't meant to be. So again, pick your poison. Do you want to be happy in the micro or do you want to be happy in the macro? And that's a choice. Yeah. And so right now I'm starting to lean towards the macro because as you get older, you're like, well, you think differently.
Yes, you do. So John, we have to land this thing in the next couple of minutes. How are we going to wrap it up?
What time? I didn't know what time this ends. I'm not good with logistics. I got to pay.
At 1:30, I think. Perhaps Pam will help us. But
there's a lot of questions in the chat too. Oh
yeah.
my goodness.
I'm going to put my email address in the chat so that if anyone wants to follow up, there were a number of questions that we didn't get to talk about and answer. So if anyone would like to email me, I'd be delighted to continue the conversation. And Pam, would you like to make any final announcements about?
Yeah, I'll send out kind of a recap with at least the, yeah, you're putting it in the chat now, but I'll also send a recap email to those that registered and may not have been able to attend with your contact information, some links, that kind of thing, and maybe just like a bullet point overview of the discussion today. But give yourselves credit. I think you covered a lot that was in the chat too. So thank you for that. And thank you for taking so much time, and for those alum too that chimed in with your insights. Thank you for being so interactive and engaged in this webinar. We appreciate that as well.